Hello, welcome back to Talking Europe, where we are looking in this part of the programme thousands of miles away from European shores to Vietnam, to be precise. The European Parliament has just given its green light to a free trade deal with Vietnam, a deal that supporters say is a unique opportunity for the EU to increase its trade and influence in Southeast Asia. Detractors, though, claim that the deal overlooks human rights and environmental commitments, this at a time when the EU is asking its own member states to commit to ambitious climate goals. Well, we have with us a panel of members of the European Parliament. But before we start our debate, let's get an overview of this deal and what it could mean to both sides. This report from Celine Schmidt, Harry G and Luke Brown.
Business is booming, keeping these workers busy in this textile factory in Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam. Here and in factories all across the country, production is roaring, boosted by an increase in exports to the United States.
As a result of the trade war between the US and China, several sectors of the Vietnamese economy are thriving, especially our textile sector.
Since the opening of its economy in the mid-1980s, this Asian tiger has experienced an economic boom, with a peak of growth of 7% in 2018. Enough to make it the sixth biggest economy in Southeast Asia, one of the most vibrant regions in the world. Vietnam is the biggest exporter of textiles within the region's ASEAN association, and it's the second biggest exporter of electronics. An impressive performance which can be explained in part by Vietnam's many free trade agreements with the US, Japan, South Korea and even Chile. The latest, a free trade agreement with the EU, attracting widespread concern over environmental standards and human rights commitments. Seen as one of the most ambitious trade pacts with an emerging economy, now it's been ratified by EU lawmakers. It's over to Vietnam's National Assembly for the final green light.
There we go, a bit of an overview of that deal. I'll introduce our panel of MEPs now. I have with me Karin Karlsbro, Swedish MEP from the Renew Europe group. Hello there.
Hello.
And you voted in favour of this deal.
Yes, I did.
Saskia Brikman, opposite you, Belgian MEP from the Greens group. You, along with the Greens, voted against the deal.
Hello, that's right.
And we have also from the biggest group in the European Parliament, the European People's Party, Christophe Hansen, who is a Luxembourgish MEP. Hello there.
Hello.
And you also voted in favour of the deal.
I voted in favour, yes.
So we have 2 for, 1 against. So the first question really is this EU-Vietnam deal a good deal for the EU and for Vietnam? Karin, you said that it's a historic opportunity. Why is that?
Yes, because this agreement is the most ambitious trade agreement ever between the European Union and a developing country. And I would say that the package as a whole is a statement for free trade and sustainability.
Christophe, if we just hear from both of the people who are in favour first, perhaps.
Yes, of course, we believe that it is a very good agreement, and we had a large majority, a two-thirds majority in Parliament for this deal, because we have to be very clear. We are not at the end of a discussion. Of course, there are a lot of points that we still need to address in the future, and we have now created the platforms to discuss the outstanding issues besides the economic advantages and results that we will get. So this will be now, the talks really will start as well on human rights, and we have now created with this agreement the platforms to even enhance the situation in the future.
Well, I think you've kind of launched my debate for me there, because Saskia, those are some of the points that you and the rest of the Greens were most strongly talking about, the human rights and environmental concerns. Vietnam has, signed up to the International Labour Organization conventions for workers' rights. People supporting this deal have put forward evidence that human rights and environmental standards aren't being overlooked. Why did you still vote against?
Well, we decided at the end to vote against. But in the very beginning of the negotiations, as European Parliament, what the Greens were asking for is to delay the ratification process and to have 1 year, because that would have been the procedure if we had voted a report of the ratification, to discuss all those topics that still needs to be addressed, and to go deeper into the negotiations between the European Parliament and the Vietnamese authorities.
And
that's
what would you want to achieve during that year?
Well, that's what we try to do through the rapporteur and shadows, who addressed a couple of questions and issues concerning the reforms that are going on the labour codes, which are really needed. But what we also said as Greens is that if we do not reform, if Vietnam doesn't reform its penal code, its penal legislation, then all the efforts made through the labor code will not be effective. Because today, if we have problems of freedom of speech, of freedom of collective bargaining, freedom of expression, and we have those issues of human rights, and also the main problem that is all those political prisoners. It's also in the name of the constitution and of the penal code in Vietnam, and this is, of course, an issue for us.
Does
And we
the EU
lost an opportunity.
have any leverage left
to go
with Vietnam
further.
now that this has been ratified?
Vietnam is not a democracy, but we should do everything we can to promote, to support the democratic development. But we have been this negotiating has gone on since 2012.
With the European Commission, not the European Parliament.
The European Commission
parliamentarians.
has been negotiating all these years. And since the start of the negotiation, we have seen that Vietnam has ratified 6 out of 8 ILO conventions. We see a reduction on child labor. And we see that this, where we are now, we can see a bridge to also fulfill the discussion about human rights, the freedom of speech, etc. So I think we're just so disappointed of the Greens, why you gave up, because I have asked human rights activists or organizations in Vietnam. I was with the delegation before Christmas. I talked to several environmental activists, human rights activists, if they prefer to be in an agreement or out. And they said, we are trading. So the question is, should we trade with or without the agreement? And we think it's much better to have the agreement and let it serve as a platform for further discussions.
We obviously didn't talk to the same organizations because 68 NGOs and trade unions appealed the whole European Parliament. In the last days before the vote, we received tons of letters and claims to ask for this delay, not to vote against. In the very beginning, that was not our point of view. The point of view of the Greens was to delay the process and to keep
so it's
the
not a fundamental
negotiations
opposition.
going.
It's not a fundamental opposition to the deal as such.
It's a question of coherence also between what we say, what we declare as a European Parliament, and also at the European Commission side, to say that we need to use our external dimension tool, which is trade, to reinforce the human rights, to also reinforce the respect of the environment. And what we see here, that's actually, we were not satisfied with the answers to our questions through the letter by the authorities. They didn't release any political prisoners, and the one they released, they were sent abroad. So this is not the respect of human rights.
Ladies, if I could intervene, I think it is important here to say and to take not just to look at the picture, but to look as well as this at the whole movie. And that's a quote from a Belgian MEP from the S&D group. And Karin rightly highlighted it. There are a lot of the ILO convention that are, meanwhile, since we are negotiating, have already been ratified. So this is a very important progress that we note. And we have to say it's not the aim that we have to dangling carrot endlessly in front of the donkey. I think that is very important. And if we want to achieve the perfect, sometimes we could as well lose the good, and that's something very important.
Can I just put one thing to you, though, from the chair of the subcommittee on human rights, Elena, another Belgian MEP. She spoke to our French channel, and now she's very concerned about the fact that the conditions in terms of human rights are not binding. There are conditions in the deal, but she says they're not binding. And so what reason do the Vietnamese authorities have to follow these up?
I think we have to see this as a process. When we have these ILO conventions on the table, and when Vietnam is going into and sign these conventions, it's the beginning of a process. It's a bridge to also open up for the freedom of speech, for political rights, and there will be no way back. My question to the Greens again are, should it be better without this agreement when we said that we expect you have to ratify, you have to sign this, and this will serve, and we will monitor this very carefully. Will it be better to say, no, we do it later, we can do it next year or in 2 years? We have to do this now. These people ask us to support them. The reformists in Vietnam,
of course they want
activists, all these people that on the ground fight every day for their rights, they want us to be with them on their side and not betray them.
So to answer your question, we already have relations and economic relation and investments in Vietnam.
Exactly.
So it's not as even we had nothing. This trade agreement just gives them more opportunities to have investments of European business in Europe. What I disagree with is that our enterprises will go and invest in bad social and labor conditions in Vietnam. What we were asking for is to enter a dialogue, because I'm not sure now it's ratified that we'll get the opportunity to go further as a European Parliament into the discussions with the Vietnamese authorities. Why? Because we're supposed to follow, for example, the DAG, Domestic Advisory Group. This will be the group in charge of the follow-up, the monitoring implementation of this trade agreement. But this group is supposed to be composed of us, of partners from the European side, but also partners from the Vietnamese side, and including trade unions. And do we have an independent trade union in Vietnam? No. Do we have free NGOs in Vietnam?
Is that a problem for you, Christoph Hansen?
If I can interrupt you on that, we have now the timeline when everything like trade unions will, the freedom of association will be possible. And now we have as well in the PCD, we have the Article 35, which is linked to Article 13 of the FTA, that we can now have sanctions and that we can temporarily put on ice the whole agreement or part of the agreement. This is very important. This hasn't existed before, and this will only exist through the ratification. And then my question to the Greens, if I can ask, has there ever been a trade agreement?
Why didn't you ask me the questions while we're negotiating? That's funny to have questions now. No, the thing is that, as I said before, as long as there's no reform of the penal legislation in Vietnam, all the efforts that you're pointing also on the labor side will be pointless.
But then you say it's only 2023, because that's the timeline.
Themselves.
But then you say 2023 only ratification, because you were talking about 1 year, now 2023 would then be
no,
the other
1 year is the procedure of a parliament. If we ask for the postponement of the process, then we have 1 year to negotiate and to say, okay, let's come back in a year to see which efforts you made on this. But 2023 is the implementation of this convention, ILO convention. What ILO checks is not if it's implemented. What they will check if it's ratified. And what we say is that in a couple of years, I hope that we all will do our job and monitor it very good to ensure that human rights.
We only have a couple of minutes left, so I did want to ask a question about the future specifically. There are human rights indicators such as press freedom. Vietnam is 177th in the Reporters Sans Frontières ratings. It's actually behind Syria, Saudi Arabia, Yemen and Iran, which are not known as being places of press freedom. What will the Parliament concretely really be able to do if those indicators fall back in the future, or if there isn't the progress that you are hoping that you'll see?
Of course, there is a limit for the European Union, and I think we have to carefully monitoring what will happen. And I think it's our job, and I hope that we now can do it together in the Parliament.
Would you actually have action? Would you suspend
yes,
parts of the deal?
we expect action, and we will promote it, and we will use the agreement as a platform for action. And
but would that mean suspending parts of this deal, or just not going further with more?
I mean, you can compare Vietnam with, for example, Cambodia, where the development is going on the total direct another direction. In Vietnam, we can see reformists. We can see that there are forces in the society that want to open up the country, want to see more democracy. We can support this and we can make change. So I think this will give us a lot of things to work. And when it comes to supporting human rights, we cannot stand with lip service. We have to act and we have to work.
Those NGOs and trade unions asked us to vote for postponement, and you didn't. So you didn't listen to the appeal of the civil
But
society
other-
here. This is not true.
other
What
It's
you're
easy to
telling-
sit in
Other
Brussels and
NGOs
say that, but if you go to Vietnam, if you talk to the people who are afraid to even mention their own
You
names,
met the
they
EU
have
Chamber
they
of
have
Commerce
another-
and the Vietnamese
That's not true. You were not with me.
No, I was not with you in the delegation because there was no seat for the Greens at that time. Unfortunately, I would have gone if there was a seat for the Greens, but this is our system inside the European Parliament.
There was
And-
strong lobbying by the Vietnamese delegation.
Of course there was strong lobbying.
A bottle of champagne sent to every member of the committee.
I didn't get one.
You didn't get one?
No.
So you don't feel that you were adversely influenced by lobbying?
I didn't either because they probably know what my point of view was, so I didn't receive anything. But
Christoph-
this is my point,
Christoph
is
Hansen.
that there's a big gap between our intentions, our declarations,
Yeah.
and then when it comes to
action.
hard law, through trade agreements, we could act and we don't.
Well, just one final question then to Christoph Hansen, the same question I asked Karen. What if there are fallbacks on these indicators that the EU is hoping to see progress on? In terms of, would you restrict the existing free trade agreement? Would you just be not opening up new areas of free trade? Would there be any action from the European side that you would expect to see?
Now we clearly see this free trade agreement, and there is where we can have this sanction mechanism, and this clearly linked. You were addressing Maria Arena, who is the chair of the Human Rights Committee, and they were very strongly asking to have a joint committee as well, which it will be formed from MEPs from this parliament and from the Vietnamese Assembly, and this will be only in action once this agreement is ratified. So we then will have the platform to supervise and to really monitor on the field what is happening. This is important. This has been a very strong point by the Parliament, and we got it, and now we have the platform.
All right, well, the full agreement, as you say, has not come into force yet. The European Parliament ratification was a very key step. Thank you all very much for taking part in this debate. Thanks to you as well for watching. Hope to see you soon for more European news on France 24.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.